The invoice sat on my desk like evidence at a crime scene. $3,000 for a transmission rebuild that had failed after 2 weeks. I stared at the signature at the bottom. A signature I'd seen before, always neat, always confident. Elena Morales, the only female mechanic in Millbrook, Indiana, and apparently the only one incompetent enough to cost my factory this kind of money. I didn't waste time. By noon, I was standing in the middle of Frank's Diner, where every business owner in this town eventually ended up for lunch. The smell of coffee and fried onions hung in the air as I held court at the counter, my voice carrying exactly as far as I intended. $3,000 down the drain, I said loud enough for the booth behind me to hear. And you know what the real kick in the teeth is? I gave her a chance. Everyone said don't trust your fleet vehicles to some girl fresh out of tech school, but I thought, hey, maybe she knows what she's doing. I shook my head, letting the silence do its work. Guess I learned my lesson. Bill Henderson, who ran the hardware store, raised his eyebrows. Morales, I thought she was supposed to be good. Good at taking money, maybe. I pushed my plate away, appetite gone. The transmission she rebuilt lasted exactly 13 days before it grenaded itself on Route 37. Now I've got a truck sitting in a shop in Indianapolis getting fixed properly, and she won't return my calls. The words felt justified as they left my mouth. I had a business to run, Grayson Manufacturing, the largest employer in Millbrook, with 247 people depending on me to keep the doors open. One broken truck might not sound like much, but we ran on thin margins. Every dollar mattered. Every decision had consequences. What I didn't say, what I barely admitted to myself, was that I hadn't actually tried calling her. I'd seen the invoice from the Indianapolis shop, saw they'd blamed improper installation of the torque converter, and I'd made my assumptions. It was easier that way. Cleaner. By the time I left Frank's, half the town had heard some version of the story. Millbrook was like that, 20,000 people, but it might as well have been 200 the way information traveled. By evening, the story had evolved. Elena Morales had destroyed my truck through sheer incompetence. Some versions added that she'd been drinking. Others suggested she'd used counterfeit parts. None of it came from me directly, but I didn't correct it either. My phone rang that night while I was reviewing production schedules in my home office. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Mr. Grayson, this is Elena Morales. Her voice was controlled, but I could hear the strain underneath. I heard what you've been saying about me around town. I need you to know that I stand behind my work. That transmission was perfect when it left my shop. If there's a problem, I want to look at it. I want to make this right. Please call me back. I deleted the message and went back to my spreadsheets. The next morning, I arrived at the factory to find my production manager, Dennis, waiting by my office door. He looked worse than usual, which was saying something. Dennis always looked like he'd spent the night fighting with machinery and losing. "We've got a problem," he said. "When don't we?" "The main motor on line 3. It's making a noise." I followed him onto the factory floor, where the smell of hot metal and cutting oil was thick enough to taste. Line 3 was our bread and butter, the automated assembly line that produced the precision gears we supplied to 3 major automotive manufacturers. The motor that drove it was a beast, a 200-horsepower 3-phase beast that had been installed when the factory was built in 1987. It ran continuously, 16 hours a day, 5 days a week. The noise was hard to describe, a rhythmic grinding like someone chewing gravel, deep and wrong. "How long?" I asked. "Started yesterday afternoon. I was hoping it would smooth out." "And did it?" Dennis's silence was answer enough. I called our usual motor repair company in Indianapolis. They could send someone out in 3 weeks. We couldn't wait 3 weeks. Line 3 going down meant we'd miss our delivery deadlines. Missing deadlines meant penalty clauses. Penalty clauses meant we'd lose the contracts that kept 200 people employed. "Find someone local," I told Dennis. I don't care if they're not certified specialists. Find someone who can at least diagnose the problem. Dennis made calls. Most of the responses were the same. Motors that size required specialists. One shop in Fort Wayne might be able to send someone in 10 days. Another place in South Bend couldn't commit to a timeline. A third wanted to charge us $5,000 just to look at it. That afternoon, Dennis came back to my office with a look I didn't like. "There's one person in the county who might be able to help," he said. "She specializes in industrial electric motors, used to work for Caterpillar before she came back here to open her own shop." I knew before he said the name. Elena Morales. I started to say no immediately, but Dennis cut me off. "Tom, I know what you said about her. I know about the transmission, but she's the only option we've got unless you want to shut down the line for 2 weeks minimum. That's $250,000 in lost production, conservatively." The numbers spoke louder than my pride, barely. "Set it up," I said, "but I want a detailed written estimate before she touches anything. And I want a warranty, in writing." Dennis nodded and left. Through my office window I could see line 3. The workers there didn't know yet that their jobs might depend on someone I'd spent the last week destroying in the court of public opinion. I thought about Elena's voicemail, about the way she'd said she wanted to make it right, about the fact that I'd never actually given her the chance. The invoice from Indianapolis sat in my desk drawer. I'd looked at it a dozen times, always focusing on the blame they'd assigned. But now, with my factory's survival on the line, I pulled it out and read it more carefully. "Customer reports transmission failure. Upon inspection, found improper installation of torque converter. Recommend review of service provider credentials. Recommend review, not definitive proof, not confirmed incompetence. Just a recommendation." I thought about calling Eleanor back, about asking questions, about doing what I should have done in the first place. But then I thought about Frank's diner, about the way I'd held court, about the story that was now gospel truth in Millbrook. Instead, I closed the drawer and went back to work. Elena Morales was scheduled to arrive at the factory the next morning at 8. I told myself it was just business. One job. She'd look at the motor, give us an estimate, and probably we'd find someone else anyway. I told myself a lot of things that night. None of them helped me sleep. Elena arrived exactly at 8 in a white Ford Transit van with Morales Industrial Services painted on the side in simple black letters. No flourishes, no marketing slogans, just her name and what she did. Through my office window, I watched her park in the visitor lot and step out carrying a toolbox that looked like it weighed 40 pounds. She was smaller than I'd expected, maybe 5'4". With her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, she wore work boots, cargo pants, and a navy blue company shirt with her name embroidered over the pocket. She moved with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing and had stopped caring what anyone thought about it. I stayed in my office and let Dennis handle the initial meeting, cowardice dressed up as delegation. From my window, I watched them walk toward line 3. Elena set down her toolbox and spent a long time just listening to the motor, not touching it, not opening anything, just standing there with her eyes closed, her head tilted slightly, like she was having a conversation with the machine that the rest of us couldn't hear. After maybe 5 minutes, she opened her toolbox and pulled out what looked like a stethoscope. She pressed it against various points on the motor housing, moving methodically, making notes on a tablet. My phone buzzed. "Dennis. She wants to talk to you, says she needs to inspect the motor room records." "Send her up." I had 3 minutes to prepare, which wasn't nearly enough. What do you say to someone whose reputation you've spent a week destroying? How do you act professional when you've been anything but? The knock was firm, but not aggressive. I called her in. Elena Morales looked me directly in the eye as she entered, and I saw something there I hadn't expected. Not anger, not hurt, but a kind of weary recognition. like she'd been through this before and knew exactly how it would play out. "Mr. Grayson," she extended her hand. "Thank you for calling me in." I shook it. Her grip was strong and calloused. "Dennis says you need the maintenance records." "Yes, for the past year, if you have them. I need to know the motor's history, when it was last serviced, any repairs, lubrication schedules, anything unusual." I pulled the file from my cabinet and handed it over. She sat down without being invited and spread the papers across my desk, her eyes scanning the entries with practiced speed. "You're overdue on bearing maintenance," she said after a moment. "By about 6 months. We've been running lean, hard to schedule downtime. Harder to schedule an unplanned failure." She didn't look up from the papers. "When's the last time anyone checked the alignment?" "I'd have to ask Dennis." "I'm asking you. You're the owner. You should know these things." Now she did look up, and there was no hostility in her voice. Just fact. "This motor is 37 years old. It's run probably 20 million cycles. It doesn't owe you anything, but if you want it to keep running, you have to respect what it needs." Something in my chest tightened. "Can you fix it?" "I need to take it apart to know for sure. Based on the sound and what I'm seeing in these records, I think you've got bearing failure in the outboard end. Maybe coupling misalignment. Could be both. Won't know until I open it up." "How long?" "To diagnose. 4 hours, maybe 5. To repair depends on what I find. If it's just bearings, I can have you running in 2 days. If there's shaft damage or winding problems, could be a week. And cost?" She pulled out her tablet and typed for a moment. "Diagnostic is 500. If you approve repairs, that gets credited. Parts and labor for bearing replacement, assuming that's all it is, around 4,000. If there's more damage, I'll give you a complete estimate before proceeding. Nothing happens without your approval." It was reasonable. More than reasonable, actually. The shop in South Bend had wanted 5,000 just to look at it. "Fine," I said. "Do the diagnostic." She stood, gathering the maintenance records. At the door, she paused. "Mr. Grayson, about the transmission on your truck." Here it was. The confrontation I deserved and had been avoiding. "I know what you've been saying around town," she continued. "I want you to know that I did that job right. I've rebuilt over 200 transmissions, and I've had exactly 3 comebacks, all of them my fault, all of them fixed for free. That truck isn't one of them. The shop in Indianapolis said, the shop in Indianapolis is wrong." Her voice was calm, factual. "And if you'd called me back, if you'd let me inspect the truck, I could have proven it. But you didn't. You just decided I was incompetent and told everyone who'd listen." I wanted to defend myself, to explain about the pressure, the margins, the responsibility of keeping 247 people employed. But all of it would have been noise. She was right, and we both knew it. "I'm sorry," I said. The words felt inadequate. "I don't need your apology. I need you to stop lying about me." She held my gaze. "I need to be able to make a living in this town. Do you understand what you've done to my reputation? I'll set the record straight." "Will you? Because talk is cheap, Mr. Grayson, especially when you're the one doing the talking." She tucked the records under her arm. "I'll start the diagnostic now. Dennis has my number when you want an update." She left before I could respond. I sat at my desk for a long time after she was gone, staring at nothing. The factory hummed around me. The sound of jobs, of families fed, of a community that depended on me to make good decisions. But what kind of decisions had I been making? What kind of man throws someone under the bus to save face? My phone rang. It was Sarah, my ex-wife. We'd been divorced for 3 years, but we still talked occasionally, mostly about our daughter, Melissa, who was away at college. "Tom, what the hell did you do to Elena Morales? How do you—" I ran into her mother at the grocery store. Mrs. Morales was in tears. She said Elena's lost 3 contracts this week because of rumors. She said you started those rumors. It's complicated. It's really not. Did her work fail or didn't it? The shop in Indianapolis said, did you let her inspect it herself? Did you give her a chance to explain? The silence was damning. Tom, you're better than this. Or at least you used to be. What happened to you? I'm trying to keep the factory running. I'm trying to keep people employed. I can't afford mistakes. So you destroy someone's livelihood instead. That's your solution. Sarah's voice was sharp. You know what Melissa would say if she knew about this? She'd be ashamed. I'm ashamed for you. She hung up. I didn't try to call her back. By mid-afternoon, Elena had the motor housing open. I went down to the floor to check on progress, telling myself it was just good business practice. She was lying on a mechanic's creeper, half disappeared into the motor assembly, surrounded by parts arranged with geometric precision on a clean tarp. Her hands emerged, holding a bearing, blackened with age and wear. Found your problem, she said without pulling herself out. Outboard bearing collapsed, destroyed the race, damaged the shaft. You're lucky it didn't seize completely. Dennis crouched down beside her. Can you fix it? Now she slid out, bearing in hand. There was grease on her cheek and satisfaction in her eyes. I can fix anything. Question is cost and time. The bearing's standard. I've got 3 in stock. The shaft needs machining. I've got a buddy with a lathe who owes me a favor. If I can get the shaft to him tonight, have it back tomorrow, I can have you running by Friday afternoon. Friday? Dennis looked at me. That's 2 days ahead of schedule. That's if everything goes smooth, Elena added. But I don't see any surprises here, just deferred maintenance catching up with you. She looked directly at me. This motor would have run another 5 years if you'd changed the bearings when you were supposed to. It wasn't an accusation, just fact. Somehow that made it worse. What's the total? I asked. She consulted her tablet. Parts, machining, labor, 5,800. That includes a full bearing set, alignment check, and I'll upgrade your lubrication system while I'm at it. Think of it as insurance. Nearly $6,000, but it was half what the specialty shops wanted, and she'd have us running in 2 days instead of 2 weeks. Do it, I said. She nodded and went back to work. That evening, I sat in Frank's diner, the same place where I'd started the rumors. Bill Henderson was there, same booth as before. I slid in across from him. Bill, you remember what I said last week about Elena Morales? He looked up from his meatloaf. The mechanic. Yeah, bad situation. I was wrong. What's that? I was wrong. I didn't have all the facts. I spoke without investigating properly. And I need you to help me spread the word, the truth, this time. Elena Morales is good at her job, better than good, and I never should have said otherwise. Bill studied me for a long moment. That's big of you, Tom, but words have consequences. You can't just unsay them. I know, but I have to try. I spent the next 2 hours at that diner talking to everyone who came in. Some believed me, some didn't. Some clearly thought I was just covering my ass because I needed her help now. They weren't entirely wrong, but at least I was trying. At least I was doing something other than protecting my pride. When I got home that night, there was an email from Melissa, my daughter. Subject line, "Really, Dad? Mom told me what you did. I don't even know what to say. You taught me to take responsibility for my mistakes, to treat people fairly, to judge them on their merits, not their gender. And then you do this? I'm disappointed in you. I hope you fix it. Not for you, for her. She deserves better." I read it 3 times. Then I opened a reply and stared at the blank screen for 20 minutes before finally typing, "You're right. I'm working on it. I love you." She didn't respond. I didn't blame her. Friday morning, I arrived at the factory to find Elena's van already in the lot. According to the timestamp on the security footage, she'd been there since 5:30 a.m. It was barely 7 now. Line 3 was silent. The motor housing was reassembled, everything looking clean and organized. Elena was sitting on an upturned bucket, drinking coffee from a thermos and making notes on her tablet. "You're early," I said. She looked up. "Wanted to get the alignment done before your morning shift. Noise bothers people, and this needed precision anyway." She gestured at the motor. "Ready to test?" Dennis joined us, along with Marcus, the line supervisor. We all stood there, like we were about to witness something historic, rather than just checking if a motor would run. Elena walked to the control panel and checked everything twice. Then she looked at me. "You want to do the honors? It's your repair. It's your factory." I pressed the start button. The motor came to life smoothly. No grinding, no hesitation. Just the clean, powerful hum of machinery doing what it was designed to do. Elena stood with her stethoscope pressed against various points, checking, listening, confirming. After 5 minutes, she gave a thumbs up. "You're good. I'll monitor it for another hour to be sure, but you can run your line." The relief on Dennis's face was visible. Marcus was already calling his crew leads, getting ready to resume production. I pulled out my checkbook. "What's the final number?" 5,600. The machining came in cheaper than estimated. I wrote the check for 6,000. She looked at it. "This is 400 over. Consider it a bonus for finishing ahead of schedule." "I don't need charity, Mr. Grayson." "It's not charity. It's good business. You saved me from missing deadlines. That's worth something." She pocketed the check without further argument. "I'll email you the warranty documentation. Any problems in the next year, I'll cover parts and labor. After that, follow the maintenance schedule I'm leaving with Dennis, and this motor will outlast both of us." She started packing her tools. The morning shift was arriving, workers streaming past us toward their stations. Several of them nodded to Elena, called out thanks. Word had spread that she'd saved their jobs. I walked her to her van. The morning was cool, that particular crispness that October brings to Indiana. Cornfields in the distance were brown and ready for harvest. "Elena, about what I said, about what I did to your reputation. You apologized. You told people you were wrong. What else is there? Is it enough? Has it helped?" She was quiet for a moment, loading her toolbox into the van. "2 of the contracts I lost came back. 1 didn't. That guy said he couldn't risk working with someone controversial." She shook her head. "Controversial? Like I robbed a bank instead of just being a woman doing my job." "I'm sorry." "You keep saying that, but sorry doesn't pay my bills. Sorry doesn't give me back the reputation I spent 5 years building." She turned to face me. "You want to know what really bothers me? It's not even that you assumed I'd screwed up. People make mistakes, and mechanics get blamed for things that aren't their fault all the time. What bothers me is that you didn't ask. You just decided, and then you told everyone, and you never once considered that maybe you were wrong." She was right, completely uncomfortably right. If there's anything I can do, there isn't, not really. You can't undo what's been said. You can just do better next time, with everyone, not just me. She climbed into her van and drove away. I stood in the parking lot, watching her go, feeling like I'd just been given a gift I didn't deserve, a second chance that came wrapped in truth so honest it hurt. The rest of Friday was smooth. Line 3 ran perfectly. Production numbers were good. We'd meet our deadlines. Everything should have felt like a victory. Instead, I couldn't stop thinking about Elena's words, about the contract she'd lost, about the label controversial attached to her name because I'd been careless with mine. That afternoon, my phone rang, unknown number from Indianapolis. I almost didn't answer. "Mr. Grayson? This is Rick at Hoosier Transmission Specialists. You had us rebuild a transmission last month after it failed." "I remember." "Yeah, well, we need to talk about that. We had another truck come in this week with the same symptom. Transmission grenading after about 2 weeks. When we opened it up, we found the problem. My stomach tightened. What problem? There's a defect in a batch of torque converters we received from our parts supplier. Hairline crack in the housing that doesn't show up until the part's been under load for a while. Then it fails catastrophically. You're saying the transmission failure wasn't due to installation? No, sir. The installation on your truck was perfect. Better than perfect, actually. Whoever did that work knew exactly what they were doing. The failure was a defective part that we should have caught when we inspected it. That's on us. I sat down slowly. You blamed the mechanic who did the original rebuild. We made an assumption based on incomplete information. We were wrong. We're issuing a formal retraction and apology. We've already contacted Ms. Morales directly. I wanted to call you too. Let you know that your original mechanic was not at fault. In fact, her work was exemplary. After he hung up, I sat at my desk for a long time. Elena had been right all along. The shop in Indianapolis had been wrong, and I had destroyed her reputation based on nothing but assumptions and second-hand blame. I picked up my phone to call her, then put it down. What could I say that would matter? She already knew she'd been right. My confirmation wouldn't change what I'd done. Instead, I opened my email and started typing. Not to Elena, to every business owner, manager, and contractor in my network. A formal statement. Elena Morales had been falsely blamed for a transmission failure caused by a defective part. Her work was exemplary. Any damage to her reputation was entirely my fault, based on my failure to investigate properly. I recommended her services without reservation. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. I sent it to 147 people. Within an hour, the responses started coming in, some supportive, some questioning why I was involving them in a personal dispute. One from an old friend. Took guts to admit that publicly. Hope she forgives you. I didn't care about forgiveness. I cared about her being able to make a living. That evening I drove to Elena's shop. It was in the industrial area on the south side of town. A modest metal building with 3 bay doors. The sign was simple, professional. Through the window I could see her working on what looked like a large pump motor. I knocked on the office door. She appeared a moment later, wiping her hands on a rag. Mr. Grayson, twice in one day. I'm honored. I got a call from the transmission shop in Indianapolis. Her expression didn't change. So did I. I sent an email to my entire business network, explaining the situation, recommending you. I saw. 37 people have forwarded it to me so far. I'm trying to fix what I broke. She leaned against the doorframe. You can't fix it, Mr. Grayson. You can only stop making it worse. There's a difference. Then tell me what to do. Tell me how to make this right. You can't. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Some things don't get fixed. They just get lived with. She paused. But thank you for trying. It matters. Not enough, but it matters. We stood there in the fading light, the sound of evening traffic on the highway in the distance. Your motor's running well, she said finally. No calls about problems? Perfect. Dennis says it's quieter than it's been in years. Good. That's what matters, the work, doing it right. That's all I've ever wanted, to do good work and have it speak for itself. It does speak for itself. You're brilliant at what you do. And yet you assumed I'd failed. You didn't even question it. I had no answer for that. She went back inside, and I drove home feeling like I'd lost something I'd never actually had. The moral high ground I'd always assumed was mine by default. That weekend, I couldn't let it go. I kept thinking about Elena's face when she said, "You can't fix it," about the resignation in her voice, like she'd been through this before and would go through it again. On Sunday, I called the president of the Millbrook Chamber of Commerce. We talked for an hour. I made a proposal. Monday morning, I called Elena. "I have a business proposition," I said. "I'm listening." The Chamber of Commerce is launching an initiative to support local small businesses. We want to feature one business each month, profile in the newspaper, spotlight at the monthly meeting, social media campaign. I nominated your shop for the first feature. Silence on the line. I don't need pity, Mr. Grayson. It's not pity, it's recognition, and it's the least I can do. The least you can do is stay out of my way and let me rebuild my reputation myself. Elena, no. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I don't want to be your redemption project. I don't want to be the person you help so you can feel better about what you did. I just want to work and be left alone. She hung up. I stared at my phone, feeling the weight of good intentions built on a foundation of guilt. Maybe she was right. Maybe the best thing I could do was nothing. Just stop talking, stop trying to fix it, stop making it about my need for forgiveness. But that afternoon, something happened that took the choice out of both our hands. The motor on line 3 made a sound, not loud, not dramatic, just a small click, barely audible over the normal machinery noise. But Dennis heard it, and his face went white. "Tom, we need to shut down." "What? Elena just fixed it 3 days ago." "I know, but something's wrong. That sound, it's not normal." We shut down the line. The motor was silent, giving away nothing. Dennis and I stood there, staring at it like it might explain itself. "Call her," I said. "Tom, if this repair failed, then we need to know why. Call her." Elena arrived 40 minutes later. She didn't say anything, just went straight to the motor with her stethoscope. After 5 minutes of checking, she stepped back. "Start it up." We did. The motor ran. No click, no sound at all except normal operation. Elena listened at a dozen different points. Finally, she straightened up. "It's fine." But Dennis heard a relay in the control panel, not the motor. The motor's perfect. She walked over to the electrical panel and opened it, pointing to a contactor. "This is starting to wear. Not critical yet, but it'll need replacing in the next few months." That's what made the click. The relief was immediate. Dennis actually laughed. Elena packed up her stethoscope. "I'll send you a quote for the contactor replacement. Do it during your next scheduled maintenance." "How much do we owe you for the service call?" I asked. "Nothing. I warranted the motor repair. Checking on an unusual sound falls under that warranty. Elena, you drove out here and confirmed my work is holding up perfectly. That's worth something to me. No charge." She left before I could argue. That night I got an email from her. Subject, "The Truth." "Mr. Grayson, I need to tell you something. When your motor failed, I knew what it would cost you. I knew you'd be desperate. Part of me wanted to say no, to let you suffer the consequences of what you'd done to me. I wanted you to understand what it feels like when your livelihood is threatened because of someone else's carelessness. But I couldn't do it. Not because I forgive you. I don't, not really. But because 247 people work in your factory. Because they didn't do anything to me. Because punishing you would have punished them. I fixed your motor because it was the right thing to do, not for you. For them. I'm telling you this because I think you need to understand something. The world doesn't revolve around you and me. It doesn't revolve around your guilt or my anger. It revolves around people just trying to make a living and feed their families. When we forget that, when we make everything about our pride or our feelings, we hurt people who don't deserve it. You hurt me. You damage my reputation and my business. But you know what? I'll survive. I'm good at what I do, and eventually people will figure that out. What I couldn't survive is looking in the mirror and seeing someone who let innocent people suffer because I was too angry to do my job. So keep your apologies. Keep your business feature. Just remember this the next time you're about to make a decision. It's not about you. It never was. Elena, I read it 3 times. Then I printed it and put it in my desk drawer, where I'd see it every day. 3 weeks later, everything should have been back to normal. Line 3 ran perfectly. Production was steady. The workers had stopped talking about the motor crisis. Millbrook had moved on to new gossip, something about the high school football coach and a dispute over playing time. But I couldn't move on. Elena's email had lodged itself in my brain like a splinter I couldn't remove. "It's not about you. It never was." The words haunted me at odd moments, during budget meetings, at dinner with clients, lying in bed at night. I'd spent my entire adult life believing that being a good businessman meant making tough decisions, protecting the bottom line, taking charge. I'd built Grayson Manufacturing from a struggling factory my father left me into a company that employed nearly 250 people. I thought that meant something. I thought it made me someone. But Elena's words suggested something different, that maybe being a good businessman, being a good person, meant understanding that it wasn't about me at all. The problem was, I didn't know how to operate from that perspective. On a Tuesday in early November, Dennis knocked on my office door with an expression I'd learned to dread. "We've got another problem." "Let me guess, line 3. No, the HVAC system in the main production floor. Commercial unit handles temperature and air filtration for 40,000 square feet. The compressor's failing." I closed my eyes. "How bad?" "It'll last maybe another week, maybe less. Winter's coming. We need heat. But more importantly, we need air filtration. Some of our processes produce particulates. OSHA regulations require proper ventilation." "What are the options?" "Our regular HVC contractor says a new system will take 6 weeks to order and install. Used replacement compressor, if we can find one, might work, but sourcing and installation still takes 3 to 4 weeks. In the meantime, we shut down any processes that produce airborne particles. That's about 60% of our operation." I did the math in my head. 4 weeks of reduced production during our busiest season, contract penalties, possible lost accounts. The numbers were devastating. "Start making calls," I said. "Find me options." Dennis made calls. So did I. By end of day, we had nothing good. The compressor was an older model, hard to source. New systems were back-ordered. Temporary heating solutions existed. But the air filtration problem had no quick fix. That evening, I sat in my office long after everyone had gone home. The factory was quiet around me, just the hum of machinery on standby and the occasional creak of the building settling. Through the window, I could see the production floor in the orange glow of the safety lights. 247 jobs. That's what it came down to. Not my pride, not my reputation. Jobs, families, mortgages and car payments and college tuition. I thought about Elena's email. About 247 people who didn't deserve to suffer because of my problems. I picked up my phone and called her. "Mr. Grayson," she answered on the second ring. "Another motor problem?" "Different kind of problem. Do you know anything about industrial HVAC compressors?" A pause. "I know a fair bit. Compressors are basically motors with extra steps. What's going on?" I explained the situation. The failing unit, the sourcing problems, the timeline we couldn't afford. "Let me come look at it," she said. "Elena, you don't have to—" "I know I don't have to, but if there's a solution, I'd like to find it, not for you, for the 247 people you keep talking about." She arrived the next morning with 2 large toolboxes and a contractor I didn't recognize, a tall black man in his 50s with Jackson Climate Control embroidered on his jacket. "This is Antoine Jackson," Eleanor said. "He's the best HVAC specialist in the state. We've worked together on industrial projects." Antoine shook my hand. "Elena says you've got a compressor problem. Let's take a look." They spent 3 hours examining the system. I watched from a distance as they discussed technical details I barely understood, pointing at components, taking measurements, consulting schematics. Finally, they came to my office. "I can fix it," Elena said. "The compressor." "Yes and no. The compressor itself is shot, bearing failure, refrigerant leak, damaged valves. Can't be repaired economically, but I had an idea. She pulled out her tablet and showed me a schematic. 6 months ago, I worked on a project for a food processing plant in Lafayette. They upgraded their HVAC system and sold me their old compressor for parts. It's the exact same model as yours, still functional, just not efficient enough for their expanded facility. You have a replacement compressor in my warehouse. Antoine and I can retrofit it to your system. We'll need to modify some of the connections, update the electrical feed, recalibrate the controls, but it's doable. Antoine nodded. It's actually a better unit than what you have now. Newer bearings, better seals. You'll probably get another 10 years out of it easy. How long will the installation take? 4 days, Elena said. We shut down for a long weekend, work straight through, bring everything online Monday morning. You'll lose 4 days of production instead of 4 weeks. The difference was enormous. 4 days we could absorb. 4 weeks would have been catastrophic. What's this going to cost me? Elena and Antoine exchanged a look. She pulled up a document on her tablet. Compressor unit, I paid $8,000 for it. Parts and materials for the retrofit, maybe $3,000. Labor for both of us, 4 full days, $10,000. Call it $22,000 total. It was a third of what a new system would cost, maybe a fifth. When can you start? This weekend. We shut down Friday evening, work Saturday through Monday, test on Tuesday. I wanted to ask why she was doing this, why she was helping me again after everything I'd done. But I already knew the answer. It wasn't about me. Do it, I said. That Friday evening, Elena and Antoine arrived with a truck full of equipment. They'd recruited 2 additional technicians to help with the heavy lifting. I told my maintenance crew to provide whatever support they needed. I stayed at the factory all weekend, watching them work. They were a study in competence. Elena moved through the factory like she'd worked there for years, understanding the space, anticipating problems, solving issues before they became critical. Antoine coordinated the team with quiet authority. The 2 technicians followed instructions precisely, never questioning, trusting the expertise of their leaders. On Saturday afternoon, I brought them lunch from Frank's diner. Elena looked surprised when I set the bags down. You didn't have to do that. You're working all weekend to save my factory. Least I can do is feed you. We ate in my office, the 4 of them and me, sitting around my conference table in our work clothes, smelling of metal and refrigerant and honest labor. Antoine told a story about a disaster job in Gary where the client had tried to fix their own compressor with duct tape and prayer. One of the technicians laughed so hard he nearly choked on his sandwich. Elena was quiet, eating methodically, checking her phone occasionally. She looked tired, not just from the weekend work, but a deeper exhaustion I recognized, the fatigue of having to prove yourself over and over, of never being able to just be competent without it being remarkable. Can I ask you something? I said during a lull in the conversation. She looked up. Sure. Why'd you become a mechanic? My father owned a garage. I grew up in it. Started changing oil when I was 12. Rebuilt my first engine at 15. Never wanted to do anything else. She took a drink of water. You know what he told me when I said I wanted to study mechanical engineering? He said, Elena, you can be anything you want, but if you choose this, it's going to be hard. Not because you can't do it, you can do it better than most, but because people will always assume you can't. He was right, I said. Yeah, he usually was. She stood, gathering her trash. We should get back to work. Compressor's not going to install itself. By Sunday evening, the new compressor was in place. Monday was spent on connections, calibrations, testing. Tuesday morning, we fired up the system. It ran perfectly. Antoine did a full diagnostic, checking temperatures, airflow, filtration rates. Everything was within spec, better than spec, actually. The new compressor was more efficient than the old one had ever been. You're all set, Antoine said, shaking my hand. Change your filters regularly, maintain your ducts, and this system will outlast the building. Elena packed up her tools, made final notes in her documentation. I wrote them a check for the agreed amount. Add 5,000, I said. We agreed on 22. You saved me at least 100,000 in lost production and penalties. 5,000 more is still a bargain. She looked at the check, then at me. You don't have to keep trying to pay me extra. I'm not trying to assuage my guilt. I'm trying to pay fairly for extraordinary work. She pocketed the check without further argument. As they loaded their equipment, Dennis came running from the production floor. Tom, you need to see this. We followed him to line 3. The workers were gathered around something, talking excitedly. As we approached, I saw what had their attention, an email printout taped to the control panel. It was from one of our biggest clients, the automotive supplier we'd been working with for 15 years. The email praised our recent quality numbers and on-time delivery. Then it announced they were expanding their order by 30%, effective immediately. They were also extending our contract for another 5 years. The workers were celebrating. This meant overtime, bonuses, job security. It meant the factory wasn't just surviving, it was growing. Dennis was beaming. This is huge, Tom. 30% increase means we'll need to hire at least 20 more people. I read the email again, hardly believing it. We'd been so focused on just staying afloat that I hadn't even considered growth. Elena stood at the edge of the group, watching the celebration with a small smile. Congratulations, she said. I struggled for words. This changes everything. Good. Your people deserve it. She started to leave, but I stopped her. Elena, wait. I need to tell you something. We walked back to my office. I closed the door and pulled out the email I'd been drafting for 3 weeks. The one I'd written and deleted and rewritten a dozen times. I've been thinking about what you said, about how it's not about me, about how the world doesn't revolve around my guilt or your anger. I handed her the printed email. I want to do something, but I need your permission first. She read it. It was a proposal to the Chamber of Commerce, but not the one I'd mentioned before. This was different. I was proposing an annual scholarship, the Morales Technical Excellence Scholarship, $25,000 per year to a local high school graduate pursuing a career in technical trades. Priority consideration for women and minorities, funded by Grayson Manufacturing, but named for Eleanor and administered by a committee that would include her. I'm not trying to buy forgiveness, I said as she read. I'm trying to make sure what happened to you happens to fewer people. I'm trying to turn my mistake into something that might actually help. She was quiet for a long time. You know this doesn't fix what you did, she said finally. I know. And you know people will say you're just trying to look good. I know. And you know I might say no. I know that too. She read the proposal again, more slowly this time. If I say yes, I have conditions. The scholarship is merit-based only. No favoritism, no politics. The committee makes decisions independently. You don't get veto power. And my name stays on it whether we're friendly or not. This isn't about our relationship. It's about helping kids who want to work with their hands and their minds. Agreed. All of it. She folded the paper. Then yes, let's do it. We shook hands, a formal gesture that felt important, like we were signing a contract that mattered more than business. Over the next month, things changed. Not dramatically, not with some magical resolution, but gradually like rust being polished away. The scholarship was announced. The response from the community was overwhelming. 17 students applied in the first year. The committee, which included Elena, Antoine, 2 teachers and a retired engineer, selected a young woman named Keisha who wanted to study industrial automation. When they called to tell her, she cried. Elena's business grew. The chamber feature I'd proposed never happened, but she didn't need it. Word spread about her work on the factory's HVAC system. She picked up contracts with 2 other manufacturers, a food processing plant, and the county maintenance department. One evening, about 6 weeks after the compressor installation, she stopped by my office. No emergency, no crisis. She just knocked on the door with a paper bag in hand. "Brought you something," she said, setting it on my desk. Inside was a worn paperback. The Goal by Eliyahu Goldratt, a book about manufacturing and systems thinking. "You should read this," Elena said. "It's about understanding that businesses are systems, not collections of individual parts. When something goes wrong, the solution usually isn't blaming one component. It's understanding how the whole system works and failed." I looked at the book, then at her. "Is this your way of calling me out?" "No. It's my way of saying you're trying to learn. That matters." She headed for the door, then paused. "My father used to say that the best mechanics aren't the ones who never make mistakes. They're the ones who understand why things break and work to prevent it from happening again. I think the same applies to people." After she left, I opened the book. On the first page, she'd written a note. "Tom, machines break, people make errors, systems fail. What matters is what we learn and what we build from the pieces. Elena." I read the whole book that week. Then I read it again. Some of it was about manufacturing, but a lot of it was about humility, about understanding that you don't know everything, that systems are complex, that jumping to conclusions usually makes things worse. It was, in its own way, the most personal gift anyone had given me in years. Christmas came. The factory had its best year in a decade. We gave bonuses, threw a party, announced the 20 new hires. The scholarship winner, Keisha, stopped by to thank everyone. She showed us pictures of her first semester, her welding projects, her CAD designs, her plans for the future. Her eyes shone when she talked about technical school. "I'm going to be like Ms. Morales," she said. "I'm going to fix things and build things and show people what women can do." Elena, who'd been invited to the party, looked uncomfortable with the praise, but pleased nonetheless. "Just do good work," she told Keisha. "That's all that matters. Do good work and stand behind it." In February, I got a call from my daughter, Melissa. She was coming home for spring break and wanted to have dinner. We met at a restaurant in Indianapolis, halfway between Millbrook and her college. She was studying environmental engineering, doing well, planning for graduate school. "Mum told me about the scholarship," she said over dinner, "and about what you did to make things right with Elena." "I'm trying." "That's what she said, that you're trying." Melissa speared a piece of chicken, considering her words. "I was really angry at you, Dad. When I heard what you did, it felt like you'd become someone I didn't know." "I was that person, at least for a while. But you changed. Or you're changing. That's what matters." She looked at me with an expression that was adult and assessing. When had my daughter become so grown up? Mom and I talked about it, about how easy it is to be righteous when you haven't screwed up. The real test is what you do after. We talked for 2 hours, about her classes, her plans, her life, about the factory, the scholarship, the things I was learning. It felt like a conversation between equals, rather than parent and child. It felt like redemption of a different kind, the kind you earn slowly, through consistent effort and honest change. In April, Elena called me about a problem, not with the factory, but with her shop. She'd taken on too much work and was falling behind. She needed to expand, but didn't have the capital for a larger facility. "I'm not asking for a loan," she said quickly. "I'm asking for advice. You've built a business. You know about growth and financing. I could use some perspective." We met at her shop. I looked at her books, her client list, her growth projections. The numbers were solid. She was undercharging for her expertise and over-delivering on every job. "You need to raise your prices," I said. by at least 30%. I'll lose clients. You'll lose the cheap ones, the good ones, the ones who value quality. They'll pay it. Trust me. We spent 3 hours going through her financials, developing a business plan, identifying expansion opportunities. It felt natural, collaborative, like we were colleagues solving a problem together rather than two people bound by past mistakes and attempted redemption. At the end, she thanked me. For what? I asked. For treating me like a professional, for not making this weird, for just being helpful. That's what neighbors do. She smiled. Yeah, I guess it is. A month later, she signed a lease on a larger facility, doubled her bay space, hired 2 technicians, bought new equipment. The expansion was successful. More clients, bigger contracts, a reputation that extended beyond Millbrook into surrounding counties. In June, the factory received another contract extension. The client specifically mentioned our commitment to operational excellence and community partnership. Dennis thought it was just corporate speak, but I knew better. Reputation matters, not the kind you build through bluster and blame, but the kind you earn through consistent, honest work. One evening in July, Eleanor and I ended up at Frank's Diner at the same time. We were both there alone, both grabbing dinner after long days. Mind if I join you? I asked. Sure. We sat in the same booth where I'd started the rumors about her 9 months earlier. Neither of us mentioned it, but I think we both felt it. The ghost of that conversation, the weight of words that couldn't be unsaid. Factory's doing well, she said. Your shop's doing well too. I heard you picked up the contract with the hospital. Yeah. Their emergency generator system needed a complete overhaul. Good work, technically challenging. We talked about business, about the town, about nothing in particular. It was comfortable in the way that conversations between people who've been through something together can be comfortable. As we were leaving, Eleanor stopped me in the parking lot. Tom, I want to tell you something. What you did, starting that scholarship, helping with my business plan, all of it, it doesn't erase what happened. I still remember what it felt like to lose contracts because of rumors you started. I still remember the anger and the hurt. I know, I said, but I also want you to know that I respect what you've done since then. You didn't just apologize and move on. You actually changed. You actually tried to make things better, not just for me, but for other people too. That matters. Are we okay? I asked. She considered the question. We're not friends. Maybe we won't ever be. But we're something. Neighbors who respect each other. Professionals who trust each other's work. People who've been through something hard and came out better on the other side. I can live with that. Me too. We shook hands again, the same formal gesture we'd used when agreeing to the scholarship. But this time it felt different. Not like a contract, but like a conclusion. Like a chapter ending and a new one beginning. I drove home thinking about repair work, about how Elena had told me that some things can't be fixed, only lived with. But maybe that wasn't entirely true. Maybe some things can be repaired, not back to new, but to something different. Something that works, something that holds. The motor on line 3 still ran perfectly. The HVAC system maintained consistent temperature and air quality. The scholarship was accepting applications for its 2nd year. Elena's business was thriving. My relationship with my daughter was stronger than it had been in years. None of it erased what I'd done, but all of it suggested that repair was possible. Not easy, not complete, but possible. That night, I took out Elena's note from the book she'd given me. Machines break, people make errors, systems fail. What matters is what we learn and what we build from the pieces. And I thought about my father, who'd built this factory and taught me to value hard work and results. He'd never taught me much about humility or admitting mistakes. Maybe he hadn't known how. Maybe he'd never had to learn. But I had learned. through pain and embarrassment and the patient expertise of a woman I'd wronged. I'd learned that leadership isn't about being right, it's about being honest. That reputation is built through consistent action, not clever words. That the world doesn't revolve around you, and understanding that truth is the first step toward actually making a difference. Elena had repaired the motor my factory needed, but in the process, she'd helped repair something else, something I hadn't even realized was broken until she showed me what working properly looked like. Not forgiveness, exactly, not redemption in the dramatic sense. Just repair work, honest, difficult, essential repair work, and maybe that was enough.